Islamic law basically says that if there is gharar in a contract, that element invalidates the contract. So that contract is invalid and cannot be enforced. In fact, it's sinful for a Muslim as an article of faith to continue with that contract. So it has a spiritual consequence and a legal consequence. One of the most striking examples of gharar is gambling. And I talked about gambling earlier. We have very striking verses in the Quran relating to gambling. In one verse, Allah says, "O you who believe, intoxicants and gambling, sacrificing to false gods, and divination by arrows are the filth of Satan's work. Keep away from them so that you may prosper." In another verse he says, "They ask you about intoxicants and gambling. Say there is great sin in both, and some benefit for people." So there may be some benefit in intoxicants and gambling, but the sin is greater than the benefit. So why is gambling so stridently prohibited and warned against in the Quran? The reason is that gambling creates a deadweight loss to society. Yeah? And I like to sometimes explain the prohibition of gharar and the prohibition of riba as a principle of efficiency. The purpose of Islamic law is to promote efficiency in the market, which is why Islamic law is loath to interfere with the market mechanism. Yeah? So except to ensure freedom in the market. So an Islamic government may interfere with the market where the market is being corrupted or manipulated in order to ensure freedom. But in general, Islamic law does not like interfering with the market. Why? Because it likes to promote market efficiency through the market mechanism. So how do we define that efficiency? In principle, a transaction in the market is efficient when the right price is paid for it. So if I buy shirts and I pay for them with apples, then the right price for shirts is how many apples are worth one shirt. That's the right price, and that's determined by supply and demand in the market. If that price is interfered with in some way, through some form of fraud or market interference or undue influence, then you have the unlawful devouring of wealth by one party against another. This is what God warns us against, because this is what leads to great suffering. So what does gambling do? Gambling involves the creation of a risk where the risk did not exist before. And it involves a deadweight loss to society, because energy and time and resources are expended in the process of gambling, but nothing is produced. It's a pure transfer of wealth. A bit like theft. So when a person steals, and there will be very few people here who will say that stealing is a moral activity. Most of us will probably agree that stealing is immoral. But if you think about it in terms of economics and efficiency, why is stealing so bad for the economy? It's bad because if everybody stole, we'd all starve to death, because nobody would produce anything. We'd just steal from each other and then steal back, and then we'd just keep taking the eggs from one basket into another, and then we'd die because nobody would produce anything. And if we were all to sit around gambling, the same would happen. So gambling and theft are very similar to each other. So I said that trading in risk causes a mispricing of risk. Why? Because God, as the creator, created the earth and created within it certain risks. So he created the risks of flood, of fire, of destruction. You could have an asset that falls into the sea. So all the assets and wealth that exist in the earth are subject to certain risks. And what God says is, if you want to trade those risks and you want to put a price on those risks, you cannot, because you do not know the mind of God. Only God knows the price of risk. So if you enter into a trading of risk, you will inevitably misprice that risk. So one party will gain from risk they didn't take, or another party will take risk but not gain from it. And so again, it will lead to an unlawful devouring of risk. And the basic principle that the Prophet Muhammad taught is al-ghunmu bil-ghurm, that benefit should derive from the assumption of risk, and there should be a commensurability between the two. Now, when you trade risk, for example, in an insurance contract or in a swap, what you're doing is you're getting very clever actuaries to try to price that risk. And I've met very clever actuaries from some of the big banks, and I've asked them, how do you price the risk? And they said, you know what? We do all of our, this was a quantum physicist, yeah? So we do all of our mathematics, and then we put our fingers in the air and we take a hunch. We don't really know what is the price of risk, it's a guess. And very often we get it wrong, as you know. Yeah? And we all know from the last few years how wrong people have got it.